Jason told me I wasn't good enough for Madison just a day before he confessed that he'd been in love with my wife for years. At first it sounded like a joke, but once everything came out, it felt more like a warning I had been stupid enough to ignore. My name is Daniel Cole, and I live with my wife Madison in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Oregon. My sister, Rebecca, has been married to Jason for 8 years, and during all that time, I never looked at him with even a hint of suspicion. He was the kind of man everyone trusted, friendly, quick to offer help, always showing up at the right time, good enough on the surface that no one ever questioned what he might be hiding underneath. Our families were close in that comfortable American way: barbecues, Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties for the kids, Sunday afternoons watching football while drinking beer. I thought I understood Jason. Maybe that was my first mistake. That morning, while Madison tied her hair and looked in the mirror, she asked me a question that sounded casual but stuck with me all day. What do you think Jason wants to talk to me about? He had invited her to lunch, to talk privately. It was unusual but not enough to raise alarm. Jason sometimes asked Madison for marriage advice because he and Rebecca didn't always get along. The situation felt so familiar that I told her it was probably about one of their arguments. Madison left around 11:20, put on her jacket, smiled, and said she'd be back soon. Nothing about her demeanor suggested she was walking straight into a disaster. And that's what unsettles me the most. When I look back, everything was too calm, too normal, too safe for anyone to notice the storm building quietly underneath. I was working when Madison called. The moment I answered, her voice came out tight and unsteady, like someone who had just witnessed something unbelievable. Daniel, Jason said he loves me. My hand tightened around the phone. The whole house around me seemed to go silent in a way that made my ears hurt. I knew Madison well enough to recognize when she was telling the truth, and in that moment, I didn't need to ask, "Are you sure?" She told me exactly what Jason had said at the cafe: that he'd loved her since the first time they met, that he'd tried to suppress it but couldn't anymore, that he believed there was something between them, and that if she were with him, her life would be different. He even added that he would treat her the way she deserved. I could only manage one question: he said all of that? Madison nodded, still shell-shocked. When she got home, her phone kept buzzing: texts, missed calls, and voicemails from Jason. Apologies, excuses, pleas, begging her not to tell Rebecca. I told Madison to answer and put it on speaker. Jason's voice instantly shifted between begging and defending himself. He said he misread the signals, that Madison had looked at him in a special way, and that something in our house the other day made him feel there had been a moment. Madison's face went pale. I knew my wife. She had never given him a single signal. Whatever Jason thought he saw was something he invented. The most disturbing part was when Jason asked if we planned to tell Rebecca. His voice shook like someone about to face the consequences of his own actions. I said, "I'll call you tomorrow." He paused, then cried. I hung up. Our house fell silent. Madison sat next to me with trembling hands. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at myself for ignoring the subtle signs over the years, the way Jason complimented her too enthusiastically, the messages that seemed harmless but came too often, the lingering looks during family gatherings. I saw all of it, but dismissed it as a friendly brother-in-law. That night, while Madison slept in exhaustion, I stayed awake in the living room, staring out at the yard. No sounds of traffic, no voices, no hint of normalcy. I realized that what happened wasn't a sudden mistake. It was the outcome of years of a man feeding something inside him he had no right to feed, and the worst part, I sensed Jason hadn't told us everything. A man who confesses feelings like that rarely has only one layer of secrets. Something darker was hiding beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. None of us were prepared for it. I didn't sleep. Madison's breathing beside me was steady but shallow, proof she wasn't truly resting. My mind twisted between anger, fear, and a cold sensation I'd never felt before, the sense that my family was inching dangerously close to a cliff without realizing it. What disturbed me most wasn't the confession. It was how determined Jason was to blame Madison. The way he insisted she'd sent signals was more alarming than anything he'd actually said. Jason called at 7:14 the next morning. I ignored it. He left a 3-minute voicemail, his tone wavering between fear and defensiveness. He claimed it was a misunderstanding, that he'd been overwhelmed by emotion, then pivoted to accusing Madison of being too warm and too friendly. If yesterday I thought he was desperate, that morning I understood something else entirely. Jason was trying to save himself by dragging Madison down with him. That is the most dangerous kind of man, one who sees himself as the victim of his own wrongdoing. Madison stared at me as I finished listening. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I needed to be sure whatever decision I made wouldn't destroy a family over a moment of emotional impulse. But I also couldn't let Madison endure another minute of Jason's warped accusations. "We have to tell Rebecca," I said. Madison paused, then nodded, not with hesitation, but resignation. She wasn't scared. She was hurt, but before we could reach out, the thing I feared most happened. Rebecca called me first. She was crying. Not the kind of crying that comes from heartbreak. This was the sound of someone being stabbed from behind. "Daniel, Jason told me Madison started it." I froze. Madison stared at me, stunned. I put the phone on speaker. Rebecca said Jason had run into their bedroom the night before, sobbing, claiming he'd made a mistake, then twisting the entire story so that Madison had supposedly seduced him. He said he was weak, that it was just a moment, and that he thought Madison wanted more. Madison's hand clenched around her leg. I held her hand, feeling her tremble. "Rebecca, that's not true," I said, my voice calm in a way that surprised me. "Jason lied, and we have proof." I scheduled a meeting with her for later that evening. When the call ended, Madison whispered, "Daniel, he really said that?" I nodded. Madison looked away, out the window. "He didn't just confess to me. He needed me to share the guilt so he wouldn't face himself." When we arrived at Rebecca's house, the tension in the air felt like a storm ready to break. Jason was on the porch, pale and shaking. When he saw us, he forced a weak smile, as if everything was just a misunderstanding. "Daniel, Madison." "I don't say anything," I cut in. He shut up instantly. Rebecca stepped outside, her eyes puffy from crying. Madison handed her the phone, opened the texts and voicemails. I watched the look on Rebecca's face shift from confusion to pain to a cold, righteous fury. Jason immediately tried gaslighting. "You don't understand. I misread things." Madison stopped talking, Rebecca said quietly, but with such force that Jason froze. She wasn't the anxious or forgiving wife tonight, she was the judge. Jason kept trying to blame Madison, saying she joked too much, that she teased him, that she smiled at him in a special way. Madison looked him straight in the eye and said, "You think my smile is an invitation? Do you think every woman who smiles at you at the grocery store is in love with you too?" Jason flushed red, speechless. The crack formed when Rebecca told Jason to pack his bags. No yelling, no dramatic scene, just, "I don't want to look at you anymore." In that moment, I understood this wasn't about a misplaced confession. It was about Jason's distorted worldview about women, about Madison, and about himself. But the night was far from over. When Rebecca opened Jason's laptop, her hands trembled but her eyes were sharp. Within minutes, she found something that made every hair on my body stand up, a folder full of secret photos of Madison. Not family photos, not casual shots. Images Madison didn't even know existed: beach days, barbecues, her reading a book in our backyard. All cataloged and hidden. Madison stumbled back, hand over her mouth. Rebecca slammed the laptop shut as if it were burning her. My legs nearly gave out. That was the moment I realized Jason wasn't confused. He had spent years cultivating an obsession under the disguise of family closeness, and deep inside, I knew the worst part of the story was still ahead. From the moment those photos appeared, the entire atmosphere in the room shifted. There was no more shouting. No more chaotic arguing, just the heavy, suffocating silence of three people standing in front of a truth that couldn't be undone. Rebecca sat upright with her hands pressed against her knees, as if she needed physical pressure to keep her emotions from exploding. Madison stood near the window, staring outside without really seeing anything. And me, I felt a part of my world sinking. Jason walked out of the bedroom with his duffel bag. One look at Rebecca's face and he knew exactly what she had found. He tried to speak, but she got there first. "How long have you been stalking Madison?" she asked, each word like a blade. Jason flinched, looking from Rebecca to me to Madison, then dropping his gaze like a shoplifter caught on camera. I wasn't stalking her. Just what?" Rebecca pressed. Jason swallowed hard, refusing to meet her eyes. "I just kept a few pictures. For the memories. Family memories." "Family?" I said. "All the pictures are only of Madison." Jason opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was cornered. And he knew it. His eyes took on that pleading look I'd grown sick of. "Daniel, bro, I'm sorry. I didn't do anything wrong. I just admire her. Madison is a good woman." Jason, I interrupted. "Don't use the word admire. That's you trying to make this sound less disturbing than it is." He stared at me as if searching for sympathy. But all I had left for him was disgust. Rebecca reopened the laptop and scrolled through the photos again. This time with a cold, methodical focus like a forensic analyst examining evidence. "Why are they all taken in secret?" she asked sharply. Jason stayed silent. "Why Madison? Why not anyone else? Why my sister-in-law?" she demanded, her voice rising with each question. Jason backed up a step, lifting his hands as if surrendering. I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I thought she liked me too. Madison turned around when she heard that. No yelling, no rage, just a look I'd never seen from her before. Quiet, cutting contempt. You think every woman who smiles at you is in love with you? You think basic kindness means something romantic? Her voice didn't shake. It was the voice of someone finally recognizing the full extent of another person's delusion. Jason started to respond, but Rebecca raised her hand. Save it. There's nothing you can say that will make any of this believable. The climax came when Rebecca turned on FaceTime to confront Jason formally, with me and Madison present. She wanted everything on record, no more excuses, no more backpedaling. I stood behind the camera listening. Jason's face looked drained, his voice cracking. I love her, he said. 3 words dropped into the room like a stone hitting concrete. Madison's eyes closed in exhaustion, as if she were being dragged deeper into a nightmare she never asked to enter. Jason continued talking, his voice trembling but strangely relieved, as though confessing freed him from the burden he had carried for years. The day you introduced Madison to me, I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. Rebecca laughed, an empty, sharp laugh of someone who had been lied to for far too long. You married me while you were in love with her? You looked into my eyes all these years and kept the secret? I tried to forget, Jason said. I thought starting a family would fix it. But Madison was always there. Madison turned away. What shocked me wasn't the confession itself. It was the way Jason spoke about Madison, as if she were something he was owed, something he deserved but I had taken from him. It wasn't love. It was possession twisted into fantasy. Rebecca stared at Jason and asked, and the photos? Explain those. Jason shook his head, tears falling, but none of it looked like real remorse. I just wanted to keep the beautiful moments. They weren't your moments, I said, stepping forward. You never had permission to see my wife that way. Jason bowed his head. Daniel, I'm sorry. I really am. No, I replied. You're not sorry. You're scared. Rebecca ended the call abruptly. The silence afterward pressed down on all of us. She stood, and with a voice steady enough to shake the house said, I'm filing for divorce on Monday. Jason collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. I looked at Madison. She wasn't crying, but her eyes had the hollow, stunned emptiness of someone trying to piece themselves back together after an emotional ambush. Rebecca turned to us. Thank you. I'll handle the rest. It was the first time I realized how strong she truly was. That night, Madison leaned her head on my shoulder as we sat in the car. She whispered something I'll never forget. I wasn't scared that he loved me. I was scared that he thought he had the right to. I held her hand tightly. She was right. This wasn't about an affair or a moment of weakness. It was about power, delusion, and the terrifying belief that a woman's existence belonged to a man simply because he desired her, and deep inside, I knew the nightmare wasn't over. 3 days later, Jason had to return to Rebecca's house because he still had legal rights to live there until the court processed the separation. Neither of us liked it, but laws don't bend to comfort. Still, the house was no longer a home. Jason slept on the living room couch, avoiding eye contact like a fugitive hiding in plain sight. Rebecca kept her distance, speaking only when necessary about childcare. Every word she spoke was sharp, precise, metallic. Jason kept lowering his head in forced remorse, but no one believed it anymore. Madison tried getting back to her normal routine, but at night she didn't sleep deeply. She'd jolt awake remembering the photos Jason had taken without her knowledge, the confession at the cafe, his desperate voicemails. I didn't blame her for being afraid. The terrifying part wasn't his confession. It was the depth of his obsession. To me, what Jason did felt like discovering a hidden camera in your home. It wasn't a mistake. It was evidence of trespassing. But the moment things truly crossed the line was the email. Madison had blocked Jason's number, but he created a new email to write to her. It was long, like a confession mixed with delusion. He began with apologies, then launched into a self-crafted narrative about all the things he loved about her. Then he described the tension between them as if it were a mutual secret only he could see. Toward the end, he attacked me, my looks, my masculinity, even our sex life. I only read the email once, not because I felt offended, but because it made something crystal clear. Jason was no longer grounded in reality. He had built an entire world where Madison belonged to him and I was the obstacle. I forwarded the email to Rebecca and her lawyer. Her lawyer said the message combined with the photos, texts, and voicemails was enough to give Rebecca a strong chance at full custody. Jason didn't fight it. He looked like someone who had exhausted every ounce of strength. When Rebecca formally filed for divorce, I brought Madison with me. She didn't need to sign anything, but being there gave her a sense of control. After leaving the law office, the February air was cold and dry. Madison squeezed my hand without saying a word. The silence felt heavy, but necessary. That evening, Rebecca called. Her voice was unbelievably steady. "I'm okay," she said. "Now, I'm okay." And I believed her not because she wasn't hurt, but because she had finally chosen her own direction. The hardest part wasn't leaving a husband. It was letting go of the version of him she had once believed in. Jason moved out a few weeks later. No dramatic goodbye. No desperate last plea. He just packed his things quietly and left behind the wreckage he created. I watched him from the porch as he drove away. I didn't feel angry or victorious. Just empty, like watching a once reliable car rust away and get abandoned on the side of the road. When life settled down again, Madison and I spent one long evening talking. She asked if I ever doubted her. I said, no, but I doubted myself for not seeing it sooner. Madison rested her head on my shoulder. The scariest part wasn't him liking me, she said. It was that he thought I owed him something. We sat in silence for a long time. Not the painful kind. The kind of silence two people share only after surviving something dark enough to make them appreciate each other deeper. Jason never contacted us again. Rebecca continued therapy for herself and her kids. Madison stayed cautious. And I learned something about the word family. Not everyone who carries that title is safe. On the last night I reflected on all this. Madison sat next to me on the couch, her fingers gently interlacing with mine. She asked, "Are you still angry?" I shook my head. "No, I just feel quiet." She tilted her head. "Quiet in what way?" After thinking for a moment, I said, "The kind of quiet that happens when something toxic finally leaves your life," and that was the truest thing I could say. Because sometimes silence isn't avoidance, it's closure.